Hi, everyone. This is Aaron, and you are listening to the Sound Words podcast. Dive In, Dig Deep is my Instagram account dedicated to the beauty of the Bible and the role of reading in the Christian life. I recently went live with Dianne Jago, founder of Deeply Rooted magazine and author of the new book, A Holy Pursuit: How the Gospel Frees Us to Follow and Lay Down Our Dreams. I recorded the audio, and I'm happy to share it with you here on the podcast. We talked about the story behind her book, her writing process, and how she sees its message to be relevant for today. We also answer a listener question. How do you differentiate the desires in your heart, if it's selfish or if it's for the Lord? Thanks for listening.
Dianne,
hello.
How are you? Are you okay? Are you ready for this?
My heart's pounding. I'm a little nervous, but I'm good.
No,
Good to be here.
No, you're gonna. This is gonna be great. Hey, I was expecting to see you on your pier. You know how you always put that. You know how you always put that pier on your stories? I love that. Like I live for that stuff. Yeah. So you're in Florida, right?
Yes, I am. I don't get great Wi-Fi out there though. So.
Oh.
Yeah.
Very nice. How is it in Florida right now?
It's good. It's peaceful. I feel like, so we're in Pensacola, which is Northwest Florida. And I feel like we're kind of behind everything. Like it's just a slower paced area. It's beautiful, but just with everything, the coronavirus and everything, we don't have much going on here. So it's kind of a slower pace.
Well, I'm glad that you're able to join this call. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah.
You wrote this book. Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself first and tell everybody else about you? What do we need to know about you as the author of this book?
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Dianne. I wrote this book, A Holy Pursuit. It released just a couple weeks ago. I'm the founder of a magazine called Deeply Rooted. And I started that, my husband and I started it maybe 6 years ago. And we have 3 kids. We're transitioning from military life to, he's now serving as a pastoral resident at our local church. So that's kind of us in a nutshell.
And what is the story behind your book exactly?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, it's about how the gospel frees us to follow and lay down our dreams. And it's really beyond a mess. Well, it helps the dream chaser navigate, should I pursue a dream? Should I not? Right now, I think a lot of us are in a season of pressing pause on a dream or surrendering one. So I don't believe that there's this one size fits all message that a lot of our culture perpetuates. They say, you should follow your heart. You should chase after your dreams, no matter what the cost is. And a lot of us are kind of realizing that message doesn't hold its own weight in today's just current events. And so beyond the message for the dream chaser, it's really a call to reformulate our biblical worldview, recalibrate, like how does scripture guide our decision making? Are we using it to inform our daily decisions, or are we being influenced by, whatever it is that we're consuming? I think for those of us right now, like if you're constantly reading articles, for instance, on COVID-19, you're filling your mind with that all day long, you're probably going to be panicked or fearful if that's the only information you're consuming. But if you're, reading information to, be aware and love your neighbor, but you're also balancing that with scripture reading and setting your mind on things above, you're going to be cautious, but you're not going to be plagued by fear because you know that there's a God who's in control. So I'm sorry if I'm getting off subject, but really it's just a call back to scripture. Like let's look at the Bible and see how that informs our lives.
Yeah. I just realized we should probably explain what Deeply Rooted magazine is exactly. Why don't you tell us all about that project?
Yeah, so it's an independent magazine, an annual publication that's all about glorifying God in womanhood. And so there's about 20 articles per issue, and we talk about, we have an ongoing Theology 101 series, we have recipes and DIYs, and so we really just try to connect how the gospel impacts our day-to-day living, and we just give short articles to help make those connections.
And you provide a lot of anecdotes in your book related to founding Deeply Rooted magazine, right?
Yeah.
What was exactly the writing process behind your book? Was this like over a long period of time when you were doing the magazine where you're like, oh, I'm going to turn this into a book one day? Like, what was your process?
Yeah, there was never an intention of writing a book. Actually, there was never even an intention of getting beyond one magazine. So we started it in early 2014 through a crowdfunding campaign. And our heart was, both my husband and I, we were like, okay, if we can just get one magazine out there, that would be awesome. Because the message of the book is very similar to the message of the magazine. It's really, let's push content out there that's beautifully done, but also is rooted in scripture and points to truth and just has sound doctrine. And so it was in May of 2018 that I was talking to a publisher, and we were talking about how the magazine started and the journey to get there. And we landed on this topic of just the messaging of our culture and how damaging it can be to the Christian. And so I wrote a book proposal about this topic. And so I guess, yeah, it's been like a 2-year process from submitting that proposal until, the publishing now. But yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. Did the 2 years go by fast?
In ways, yes. In ways, no. There were many times where I just, like, I don't know. I've never written a book before, so there was a lot of times where I felt frustrated. I felt like I didn't have the words in my head to put onto paper, and yet the Lord, like, looking back at it, I can see the Lord's hand in all of it. And at the end of the whole process, I can just really see, like, this was all him and none of it was me.
Well, okay, 2 years ago, we weren't going through this COVID-19 that the entire world is experiencing.
Yeah.
What do you hope your book can do at this time now? Like, what makes it relevant for today?
Yeah, I think if the primary point of my book were like a lot of books out there where it was just follow your hearts and it stopped there, or just chase your dreams, it would be irrelevant for today. But because I said there's not a one size fits all message, because many of us are forced to press pause on a dream or to surrender a dream. I just had a friend tell me yesterday she was just laid off from her job. And so many are questioning their current calling. Like, how does the way that my life story has been written at this point, how does that fit into God's bigger plan? And so one of the chapters in this book is called The Bigger Story, and it looks at just the grand picture of God's overarching plan that we see throughout Scripture. When we read a passage of the Bible, we're not isolating it. We're looking at it, okay, how does this fit into creation or the fall or redemption or restoration? And so in our own lives, as we step back and we stop magnifying our issues, we can see, okay, my life does fit into his bigger plan. Like, he is a sovereign God who is in control. And that perspective change really encourages us and helps us stop from feeling stuck, I guess. And so I think that the book is definitely relevant and timely, just because it's pointing us back to the God of all creation and the God who's in control of all things.
And what I really do love is the fact that you have that framework to put all of your dreams through, and just to kind of check yourself. Earlier, I did ask if people had questions for you, and we did have a question submitted. So Dianne, I'm going to ask you this question right now.
Yeah.
Okay, this was submitted to us. How do you differentiate the desires in your heart, if it's selfish or if it's for the Lord?
Yeah, that is a great question. I was thinking of Philippians 2, so I'm going to go ahead and read this verse if that's okay.
Yeah,
of course. Philippians 2:3. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but to the interests of others. And then it continues to say, like, have the mind of Christ in you, who took the form of a servant. I think when we have an intimate knowledge of Scripture and we're spending time abiding in the Lord the way that he calls us to, that completely transforms the way that we view our ambitions and the way that we make decisions. As we read the Bible, it reads us. And so we are convicted, we're transformed, we are corrected. And it uproots a lot of the sin in our lives. And so if there's a dream that we have and we're not entirely sure if it is a God-honoring dream or not, we look to Scripture. We see, is this venture that I'm wanting to partake in, is it even biblical? Does it contradict anything that's written in Scripture? Am I doing it for the glory of God, for the betterment of others, to love my neighbor? Or am I doing it to build up my name and to create a kingdom for myself? And so there's a chapter in here, chapter called Discernment for Dreamers. And I just asked a lot of
It's chapter 8.
Chapter 8.
Chapter 8. That was my favorite. No, that was my favorite chapter. That's why I know it. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, go ahead. Talk about that chapter for us.
There's practical questions just to ask yourself, like that question, is this a biblical dream? And there's just really, I don't know, just questions to help you break down and help you process practically, like, should you pursue this dream or not? So.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dianne. And yeah, that was my favorite chapter. I mean, honestly, the whole book was great. There was a section where you talk about like your meeting with John Piper, and I thought that because I could relate to that. Like we've all had those interactions where it's like, oh, should I approach them or not? And I love that stuff too. I think that like what I appreciate about your book is that it is super practical, but you lay the theology first, and so we're able to understand how that practicality comes about. You know, it's not just like practical just for the sake of being practical. There's like reason and rationale behind all of it. Man, Dianne, thank you so much for coming on this call. We can find you. You're at A Holy Pursuit. That's your Instagram handle. And then Deeply Rooted Magazine is at Deeply Rooted Mag.
Yes. Yep.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I hope this was helpful for everybody. And A Holy Pursuit is out now. B&H Publishing, pick it up and let Dianne know what you think about it. Give her some encouragement during this time. Thanks so much, Dianne.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Dianne, for being my guest on the show, and thank you everyone for listening. Dianne's book, A Holy Pursuit, is available now at the B&H Publishing Group website. You'll find that link in the show notes. Follow my Instagram account, Dive and Dig Deep, and don't forget to find me on the Sola Network podcast, the Walnut Commentary podcast from my church, and the SVRGN podcast with my wife Jess. I'll put all of those links in the show notes. Also in the show notes, you'll find links to the Sound Words podcast archive. And don't forget to subscribe to Sound Words on YouTube, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player. Just search for Sound Words. My website is musicgoon.com. The email address for this podcast is soundwords@musicgoon.com. And you can always tweet me at musicgoon. Thanks. See you soon.